We're having another beautiful sunny fool's spring day. Not real spring yet, but you know. And the weather is beautiful but windy. Under this plastic row cover, however, it is a balmy 20 degrees Celsius right now. Today I'm going to show you how to speed up the warming of your garden so that you can get those early spring crops out sooner and then get a harvest sooner. First things first, I'm going to bring in some cinder blocks to create a heat sink inside this plastic row cover. While the row cover works great to capture the sun's energy during the day when it's sunny out, it then cools down pretty quickly at night, especially when we go back down below freezing at nighttime. But things like large jugs of water, particularly if they're black, or masonry like these cinder blocks, concrete blocks, they act as a thermal mast. They hold on to the sun's energy and slowly release it throughout the night or throughout cloudy days, colder days. That's what we're going to focus on today, just to keep these beds nice and consistent in temperature, now that we've already warmed the area using the row covers. Oh, it's treacherous walking through the garden because the snow is so uneven. Oh, that one's so warm. That one was undercover already. My little thermometer here. Keep an eye on this bed. Cover it back up. So if you don't have a greenhouse, like me, don't have a greenhouse, this is a really good second best option. In fact, I might even call this a third best option. I would say second best is a glass cold frame, and that is simply because it's glass and not plastic, and I'm always trying to eliminate plastic from the garden. But sometimes the need to grow food comes first, and I mean, I'm always looking for glass that's the right size for these raised beds. At my old house, I had a recycled door. Somebody had like a glass door on the side of the road, and that fit perfectly on one of my raised beds. I haven't found something like that for these raised beds yet. I'm always looking. So ideal situation, I guess, next to a greenhouse would be to have a glass cold frame that you can put on top of your garden bed, because then as the season progresses, you take that row cover off or you just open it up, and it extends your season without requiring any of its own footprint or space in the garden. Anyway, if you can't afford a greenhouse and you don't have access to glass yet, although I encourage you to keep looking like I am, then these plastic row covers are really, really useful. You can get greenhouse grade plastic, and it lasts for several years. I've been using this stuff now for probably 6 years, and it has a few little tears in it from the clips I put on, but overall it's actually in really good condition still. Okay, so here's what I recommend. I recommend covering your beds with plastic if you plan to plant anything out before your last frost in the spring. Even if you plan to plant things out just after and it's taking a long time for the soil to warm up, you can use a row cover like this to help warm the soil, and then use the heat sink like I showed, either a cement block, cinder block, or maybe a water jug, especially if it's painted black, it works really well. There's other things that you can use, just rocks from around your property if you have them. You can put those under a plastic row cover and it acts as a heat sink. The other tip I would say is to not mulch your soil yet. I'm a huge fan of mulching, but if you want to preheat your soil, leave it black, because then it's going to absorb the sun's energy more efficiently and it's going to warm it better. I have seen people use black materials like plastic or fabric on top of their garden spaces to try to heat it faster that way. In my experience, unless the soil's already exposed underneath, like if you put it on top of snow, it actually just insulates that snow. I haven't had any success with putting something black on top of snow to melt it faster. I've had much more success with just an arched clear plastic cover on top of my raised beds to get them to warm faster. Now, in-ground gardens are going to take a little bit longer to warm up than above ground gardens or raised beds. You don't have to have an actual built raised bed out of materials. You can also just mound your soil up, and that acts as a raised bed, and then it heats faster in the spring because the sun's coming at it from all angles. Just a note, then it also gets colder faster in the fall. But in-ground gardens do technically take longer to warm up. However, with techniques like this, you can warm up any garden space, even if it's in ground, unless it's in the shade. If it's a shade garden, you're not going to have much luck with this. Here's this raised bed. I like using this one as an example because it's more clear plastic. And you look through here, you can see all the condensation. The soil is melting, it's defrosting, it's heating up, and then it's evaporating off the moisture that was in it. But it's getting caught in this plastic film, and so it goes back down onto it. You can kind of see the cinder blocks through the plastic, and that little white thing is my thermometer. It gives me a sense of how warm it is in this general area. I don't have a soil thermometer yet, so I can't tell you exactly how warm the soil temperature is. This is one of my raised beds that I have covered in greenhouse plastic. There's a ton of rabbit poop in here from the point in the winter when I took the plastic off to let the snow fall on it. Snow is really good for your garden bed, so I do recommend taking the plastic off at some point through the season to let it rejuvenate. But you can see little bits of green. This is spinach. So I also have a perennial in here, some sorrel. This is going to start to come back soon as well. This wide leg pant trend is not ideal for springtime. You should know that you can't just plant anything out under row covers like this in winter, late winter. I mean, it's not even the first day of spring yet. If you were to try to plant things like your tomatoes or your peppers or your eggplants, even cucumbers, melons, that kind of thing, they would wilt and die pretty quickly. I mean, it's warm under the row covers, but it still gets cold when it gets cold outside. I typically have about a 6 to 10 degree difference between the outside temperature and under my row covers, but that means that if it's minus 10 outside, the warmest it's going to be is like minus 4, and that's still going to freeze your frost tender plants like tomatoes and cucumbers and that kind of thing. So what I do put outside under the row covers are things like peas. Peas you can direct sow. I bet if I direct sow them into that garden right now with the heat coming off that soil, they would germinate really quickly and start to grow. But I also do start my peas inside to get a head start on them, and I'm going to transplant them out when they're just a couple of inches tall. Beets are another one that can tolerate a light freeze if they're under cover like that. They are a little bit more delicate when they're babies, when they're seedlings, but I actually also start my beets inside. Kind of controversial here. People don't normally start peas and beets and that kind of thing inside. I don't start my carrots inside. I'm not going to go that far. But beets, I like to start them inside for a couple reasons. One, the seed actually has multiple seeds in it. Like that little lump of a thing that looks like a seed, it contains multiple seeds. And so if you sow them inside, you can actually tease them apart if multiple come up right next to each other. That said, there is a thing called multi-sowing beets. Charles Dowding kind of made this famous in the gardening world, and it does work pretty well. It doesn't matter if beets are really close together. You can have little clusters of like 3 of them, and they just push out from each other. I'm getting off topic here. My point is, plant cold hardy things under row covers like that. So I mentioned peas, I mentioned beets, brassicas like cabbage, cauliflower, kohlrabi, kale, that's all the plants. They do really well in the springtime. They need that teens Celsius weather for the most part, but they don't like drastic temperature swings. You can check out my how to grow broccoli and cauliflower video for a little bit more detail on that and how finicky they are. But when you use things like a row cover with the heat sinks that I just showed, it helps to keep consistent temperature in that space, which is also going to help more finicky plants that don't like the temperature swings of early spring. What else can you plant? Radishes, spinach, these are plants that can tolerate pretty cold temperatures. Like they'll grow at temperatures just hovering above freezing, but if you have them in a row cover, it speeds their growth even more. Lettuces are another one. There are certain kinds of lettuce that are better than others in tolerating colder temperatures, but most can handle a light freeze. Arugula is a really hardy one, and cress can handle a light freeze. Just if you're going to grow lettuce, especially if you're going to direct seed it outside when it looks like this outside, but under a cover, just read the back of the seed packet and make sure that it can tolerate cold temperatures, or that it's good for cold temperatures. Because some lettuces in particular are selected or bred to be able to tolerate high temperatures so that they don't go to seed prematurely when it's really hot in the summer. Typically those ones aren't as good to grow in the colder months in the winter. Technically this is still winter. You can also put your alliums outside under row cover, leeks, onions, shallots, that kind of thing. There's one thing that I want to try but I haven't yet, and that is my strawberries. I know that you can force strawberries to come on early, to start fruiting early if they are under cover. It's like greenhouse strawberries, essentially. I have a strawberry bed right there, and it actually has a big predator-proofing cage on top of it, so I could pretty easily cover that in a plastic. I just don't have enough plastic, and I really don't want to have to go and buy more just so that I can make that work. I'm really hoping to find some used glass somewhere, somebody's old window that's going to work just perfectly for that, to make a cold frame over the strawberries. That would mean that we can get strawberries instead of in late May and throughout June, we may be able to get strawberries in early April. That would be awesome. That's on my list of things to try someday if I get the right infrastructure. So these low tunnels made with just basic old greenhouse plastic are really simple and pretty cost effective to make. I mean, you could spend $100 on materials, but you can use them year after year. And if it means that you are getting a whole extra month of harvesting spinaches, peas, lettuce, these are things that are really expensive to buy at the store. You have to weigh the costs and the savings, as with all food growing endeavors. But in my opinion, this solution here is totally worth the cost, especially if you can find reclaimed materials. All right, enough of me yammering on. It's getting a little bit windy out here, and I am not under a plastic row cover, so I think I need to go in. If you like this kind of content, you want to see more of this, please like this video, thumbs up. It'll show me that people are enjoying this kind of content, and I'll make more stuff like this. Also, please subscribe so that you are aware when my videos come up. I'm not going to ask you to hit the bell icon. I find it really annoying when my phone blows up with notifications, so I almost never opt to be notified of people's videos coming up, so I totally get that. But please subscribe, that would really help me out. I'm really happy to have you along with me as we grow our food together. I hope that you'll come and grow with us.